Welcome everyone, daily.dev episode number 40. So we achieved this new milestone. We have been doing this for a while, and today we'll talk about Node.js. It's I can say one of my favorite. It's not my favorite backend JavaScript runtime engine. And today we have two great guests, maybe three. We'll see. We have Michael from Red Hat. And then we have Marco. We'll start with Michael first, but before we get into the talks, hi everyone. We can make a sound check. How are you? How's it going?
I'm good. How about you?
Perfect. Doing great. Tomorrow is holiday also here in Italy. I don't know if you're there. So this is the last activity, and then I can relax one more day. So that's it. And hi everyone, you can say in the chat where are you from, where are you here, if you like Node.js, if you don't like Node.js, just be kind, of course. So okay, nice. Before we start, just let me tell you that all these events, these 40 YouTube events, have been all of them free, sponsored by daily.dev on our YouTube channel. So feel free to support these events if you like them. And also, of course, you can try daily.dev free extension. Now we have also we made a new mobile app some days ago, so you can even try it out. Our engineer team is always like on the roll, always releasing things like crazy. Hi everyone, how Daniele, how are you? So yes, nice, perfect. I think that we can start, and I think we will start with Michael. So Marco, see you later, and yeah, we can start. Bye. Okay, Michael. So when I prepare these presentations, these events, I say, I already saw this guy somewhere, like this face, because you have been here maybe last year in 2023, maybe with different topics. But of course, please reintroduce yourself, and then we can start. So what about
you? Yeah, I know I was here last year talking about native add-ons. I'm Michael Dawson. I work for Red Hat. I'm the lead of the Node.js team. And that means I get to spend a lot of time working in the Node.js community. I'm on the technical steering committee, involved in a whole bunch of the different working groups. Also means that I get to work with a lot of great teams within Red Hat who either like operate Node.js applications, because we do that, or work with our customers to deploy their applications on things like OpenShift and so forth. So just nice mix of working, with customers and with the upstream community, and really enjoy it.
Nice, thank you. So, can you give us a quick preview of today's talk, and then when you want, we can also share the screen, of course.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm going to take everybody through my inaugural AI journey. You've probably heard a lot about AI, and large language models in particular seem to be all the sort of craze these days. And so I thought it was going to be a lot harder to sort of start to work with the model, run them locally. And so I did some experimentation. Of course, I wanted to do that with Node. There's a lot of training, and even like our own company was like, hey, everybody go take this training, but it was all in Python. So I wanted to work through doing that with Node. And really what I'm going to do is take you through my journey of doing that, what I learned, and hopefully it'll answer a lot of the questions and get you encouraged and excited to jump in using Node and some large language models.
Yes. I already said that I'm a huge fan of Node.js. I'm not even trying to hide that. So, Michael, let's get started. Can I share your screen? Yep. And also, I think I will get some inspiration because I'm also preparing some presentations about AI and the LLM and the LangChain models. So I will be in the backyard, and I'll check all the chat. If you have any question, just drop them in the chat, and we will have a Q&A session at the end. So best of luck, Michael, and see you later. Bye.
Thank you very much. Okay, so welcome to my talk, an inaugural AI journey with LangChain and Node.js. As I mentioned, this is my journey of sort of doing some learning. I already introduced myself, so I'm going to skip quickly through, about me. But now I'm going to give you a little bit of an idea of what I'm going to take you through. So I'm going to start with why Node.js. Often you hear other languages as like the things that are going to be used with AI, but I'm going to talk a little bit about, why would I be using Node.js and AI? And then I'm going to take you through my journey. Really, as I said, starting off as a newbie, I'm not an expert in the AI space. coming to it as a Node developer who wants to know what is it going to mean to me going forward, because it's obviously going to have an impact. I'm then going to look at running a model locally, leveraging a GPU to make things go faster. You probably, if you've been watching or sort of reading about large language models, you've probably heard about retrieval augmented generation. So I'm going to look at like, how do I implement that? And then I'm going to look at like the backends. Probably going to want to use different backends, maybe one for my inner loop when I'm developing and one for deployment. So we'll talk about like, how do you actually end up using different model serving options once you get there. So first of all, why Node.js? Python is often seen as the runtime for AI. Data scientists use Python. So a lot of the tools will start out being very Python oriented, and you'll hear people saying like, Python when they're talking about AI. But really, I think people are starting to recognize and realize that like, that doesn't mean we're going to move all of our application development to Python, right? Like, different languages have different strengths and benefits, and depending on the environment. So, we've seen over the last few years a trend to move towards a more polyglot world where people use the right languages and runtimes for their environment to solve their particular tool, their particular problems. And so I still think that's going to apply. Different languages are going to win, and Node has some particular advantages in certain environments. And so it's going to continue to play and be a big player in the places where it's been doing well. I'd also nice to see that some of the emerging AI client libraries often now support TypeScript and JavaScript. So they all support Python, but some of them, as their second language, are supporting TypeScript and JavaScript, which I think is a nod to a lot of applications that are going to integrate AI will be using JavaScript. So, why Node.js? Because we're going to continue to write applications and run them using Node.js. And those applications are likely going to want it to more and more pull in some AI components. And so you're still going to be using JavaScript to do. So really, okay, as a Node.js developer, what does that mean to me in terms of AI and integration and stuff? Well, until recently, that really was probably going to be HTTPS calls. We're going to make calls for remote services to some bespoke service. So basically, one-off service that says, here's my API. Here are my parameters. If you wanted to connect to a different one, then you'd have to use a different set of APIs, or maybe it was even a sort of a homegrown set of APIs within your organization. Well, more recently, that what we're seeing is that libraries are now emerging, which make it easier not only to make the calls and requests to the large language models, but also the things you want to do around them in terms of making your requests more efficient. And some of the interesting ones are like LangChain and LambdaX. And really, there's a growing list. A whole bunch of startups are really jumping in to provide a better user experience when you're working with these language models. So what does that mean as a Node developer today? Probably just like in other areas, there's going to be a number of different libraries which you may want to learn about and which simplify access and integrating to large language models. So a little bit, why Node, what it means to us. So now let's look at running your first LangChain.js application. I picked LangChain.js because it's one of the libraries that supports JavaScript, and I wanted to be able to run my application, to start out locally, and it was one of the good options. So before I get started, what are the first things I need? I need a model or a remote API service. Coming from the company, I know we need to really be cautious with proprietary info, so I didn't want to start with a remote service. So instead, I wanted to run my model locally, because in the worst case, I can run locally, and that keeps all of the data that I'm using, and I'm still just using data that's freely available. But being cautious, I'll make sure that my data doesn't actually leave my organization, and that's an important aspect for many organizations. So starting with a local model is a good place to start. So where do I get a model? I guess I kind of, we're assuming you know what a model is, but the model is, the representation of all the knowledge it's been trained on. And that's what you basically ask your large language model questions to. When you're asking GPT a question, it's going to their model and it's generating that answer. Hugging Face is basically the GitHub or NPM, I guess in our case, of models. It's the place you can go to models. You can read about them. It provides these nice sort of cards which will show you information about the models that are available. There's all sorts of models, and even for each model, there's going to be a bunch of different variants. The different variants have different attributes in terms of like how big they are, how they've been quantized. Quantized basically is how big a math do we use, right? Do we use smaller math to make the model smaller, or do we use big math to make it as accurate as possible? And the thing I like is they've got this use case description for all the models that sort of says like, hey, this one is small but also pretty accurate, so we recommend you use it in these cases. So you can go to Hugging Face, you can find a model, and models are actually good for different things. So some models will be good at answering certain kind of questions, other models will be answering other kind of questions. But the basic question is, where do I get to a model? Go to Hugging Face, there'll be a bunch of models there. Often, or find like an example like what I put together, and it'll pick the fairly generic model that you can start working with. So I now got a model, and I just curl that down. That can be like a 5 gig, 10 gig file, but you just download it onto your system. So I got the model. How do I load the model? There's a number of different ways you can load the model. And this list, again, like everything in this space, is growing. A couple that I looked at were like llama.cpp, that lets you start a model as a separate process. It loads the model and then provides an API you can make a REST call to. Ollama, actually, Ollama is the one that gives that REST case, but llama.cpp lets you load it in as a C program. Hugging Face has something called transformers. But being in the Node ecosystem, I ended up using Node llama.cpp, which lets us very easily load a model into our Node process and start interacting with it, which is great. When I look at it though, I'm like, wait a second, what's the covers here? It's using Node add-on API. And if you watch all of the Node.js, the monthly dev installments, I was here actually last year for number 29, talking about building native add-ons like it's 2023. And I'm very active in the Node.js projects working group that works on the Node add-on API. So I'm like, hey, wait a sec, this is really cool. Some of this AI stuff is actually using Node add-on API, which I help put together and help maintain. And if I look into the code, I can see, wait a sec, it looks very familiar. It's basically the nice integration where I can understand how the arguments are being passed from JavaScript into the C++ code. I can see it pulling out the options like the GPU layers that's shown here. And so very nice use of Node add-on API. And actually, I think it enables Node llama.cpp because what they do is they actually have pre-built binaries. And when you install it, it doesn't necessarily have to compile the add-on. It just uses the pre-built binaries, and Node add-on API makes it a lot easier to build one version of that will run with a whole bunch of different Node versions. So really cool to see that that's being used behind the covers. At this point, I've been talking for a few minutes. You're like, well, where's the code? Well, okay, yep, I have a GitHub repo. You can go to Dawson AI experimentation. And if you want to follow along with the code, I'd suggest you go to the lesson 3.4 directory and you open up the LangChain backends.mjs file, because that has all of the code that I'm going to be talking about and showing you today. So we were like, okay, how do I load the model, right? And we're going to use Node llama.cpp. The good thing is that it's integrated into LangChain.js, so I can use Node llama.cpp by importing it in that particular call where we see at LangChain community LLMs llama.cpp. But it's really as simple as setting up the path to my model. So that minstrel 7b instruct is the model that I downloaded from Hugging Face. I created the path to it. I load it, and I await creating a llama.cpp instance. And now I have a model, and a model is a generic API that's supported by LangChain.js that I can use to then build up chains and make my calls to the model. So I load my model, but now I want to ask it my first question. And so I'm going to create a chain. Chain is part of LangChain, so that it makes sense that it's going to provide a way for me to be able to create basically a chain that my question to the model goes through before it actually makes the request and gives me the answer. I'm going to start out with a really simple chain, which is just basically a prompt template. And that prompt template says, ask this question. And if you don't know, say so, and then it gives the input, which is the question. And so I just basically create my prompt using the chat prompt template API, and then I can pipe that to the model, and now I have a chain that I can ask questions. So in this case, I'm going to ask my question. I've added some dates so we can see how long it takes so far, but it's as simple as saying, hey, await chain invoke, should I use npm start to start a Node.js application? So takes about 25 seconds. It's not too bad. I've got a machine with about 16 cores, 120 gig of RAM, but not using a GPU. 25 seconds for experimenting, that's not too bad. Unfortunately, I don't get the answer that I want. Now, I'm not too surprised because in terms of best practice, or I shouldn't say best practice, but common practice, like you'll commonly see people starting npm, using npm to start their Node applications. And even though like many people don't recommend that, even like at the Node Technical Steering Committee meeting, we got into a discussion on that a few weeks back, and was like, well, nobody should be doing that. But it's common enough practice. I'm not surprised that based on the data the model was trained on, it's saying yes. We even despite there being some things like the Node.js reference architecture, which says don't do that. I mentioned the Node.js architecture as well because I was again related to the daily dev. I was on JS Drops, I think, last year sometime, and I talked about growing success across organizations with building a reference architecture for your organizations being one of the ways to do that. So if you want to sort of watch that, or go back and read the Node.js reference architecture, I mentioned it there. So what I think is really cool is it didn't take me very much code at all. I downloaded this model, and with a very small amount of code, I got that I could ask a question running locally, which I really think is great. Like I thought that was going to be a lot harder, but using Node and existing tools and packages and stuff, super simple. So if you've been, thinking that's going to be hard to run the model locally, nope, not at all. But 25 seconds long, terrible, but it's a wait. So the good news is Node Llama CPP supports GPUs. It's already enabled by default on Mac OS as long as you're using non-Intel machines. So actually, it might just have been faster for you. I was running on Windows. But it is easy to enable for Windows. So I had to run out, bought a GPU because it's like, okay, this is starting to get interesting. Let's do some experimentation with the GPU. So turn on the GPU in Windows with an NVIDIA card, which is what I got. It's pretty straightforward. You just install the CUDA toolkit. You install the C++ compiler for your platform, including CMake and CMake.js. And then, just like we're familiar with for Node, we can recompile an add-on with npx --node llama cpp download --CUDA, which basically says, don't use my pre-built binary. I want to recompile, and I'm going to turn on CUDA. And, it was fairly simple. I think I did need to potentially restart the machine. I had some problems with it finding the CUDA toolkit installation, but once I rebooted, everything was found. And so it was really as simple as through the UI, installing the CUDA toolkit, installing the compiler, npx, and now I went from 25 seconds to 3 seconds. That starts to get pretty close to like if you're using ChatGPT or some other hosted model. But it feels really much in the same category. I don't think I was really stressing it, but for reference, I was using a 4060 Ti with 16 gig of RAM. But I think other graphic cards, you probably get something quite similar. So nice, fast, but I still get the wrong answer. So unfortunately, the models are out there, but they're trained on a lot of generic data, and they may not give the answers that really you would like to be used, say, within your organization or with the customers that you're working with. So often you want to add some additional knowledge to a model, but building and training a model can be a lot of work. There's some emerging progress on making that easier for businesses, but at the whole, that's a pretty high bar. If you just want to add a little bit of knowledge, like building your whole model yourself can actually be a pretty high bar. And often we just want to add a little bit of specific information so that the model can give us better answers. Now, I'm just going to mention prompt engineering. If you've been reading about large language models, it's probably something that you've read on. And a prompt typically includes the question you want to ask and then some context. And for example, if you've ever gone on ChatGPT and you're chatting, the context becomes your past question. So like you can ask a question that says, please, make this abstract better for me, right? If it gives you an answer and you say, try again, it'll send your original question, the initial attempt it made at improving your abstract, and then as context for when you say try again. So it knows what to do, and it can use that context in terms of doing a better answer the next time. But that's only one way that you can create context. So fundamentally, you make a request to these large language models, you give them a question, and you can give them some context that it uses to help improve the answer that it would give you without that context. So you probably, again, if you've been doing some reading, you've probably heard of retrieval augmented generation. And that's really just a way to provide some context to the model that will help you get a better answer. And what it does, the general approach is that, you take a set of documents, you ingest those documents, you sort of break them up into relative chunks of data, because we can't, process the whole thing all together. And then somehow we extract relevant chunks when we've got a question, and we add them into the context, and that helps the model make a better answer. Unfortunately, we can't just ingest all the documents and shove that all into the context, because the model context is limited generally by the model. And something like 2K, I haven't done a lot of research, but 2K is roughly, I think, what I have in mind now for that's the amount of data you can put into the context. So obviously I can't give an entire library or an entire encyclopedia. I have to be quite a bit more specific when I want to make a particular question. And retrieval augmented generation is meant to do that in an efficient way. So let's look at using LangChain.js. Again, it provides a number of APIs to help us implement retrieval augmented generation, as well as other things, typical things you want to do when you're working with these large language models. So in my case, I took my Node.js reference architecture, which I know has the answer to the question that I would like to get, and I put it into the source documents directory. And then I can use the directory loader API, which will parse all the files in that directory and subdirectories and ingest them. And I can tell it, every time you see a markdown file, I want you to use the text loader. And it supports a bunch of different ends like PDFs, CSV files. And if there's a format of file that it doesn't doesn't support, you can write your own loader and say, when you see this type of file, use this loader to ingest those documents. So again, very little bit of, small amount of node code here, where I can basically load the documents. I've got them all loaded. And now, that's the base reference with information that I want to provide to get better answers from my large language model. Now, as I mentioned before, I can't stuff all of those documents into the context. So I'm going to have to provide it smaller chunks or subsections of those documents. So I need to split up my markdown into chunks, and I chose chunks of 500 bytes and a little bit of overlap so that you have some redundancy in the content. And so this just says, okay, take all those documents that you've ingested, split them into chunks that are 500 in size with some overlap, and now I've got a whole bunch of chunks. So now I've got those smaller chunks that represent my my documents. Of course, I could do this on my own with code, but the nice thing about these libraries like LangChain or LambdaX is that they give you the APIs to do this very easily. And again, I've ended up with my split documents with, 5 more lines of code. Now, I don't necessarily want to ingest and process my document every single time. I actually do that in this case because it was easy. But normally you're going to want to stick your document chunks into a database. You also need a database because how do you find the right chunks? I got to find 2K of good context based on my question. How do I do that? Well, Typically, people stick them into a vector data store, although there's no requirement. Like any way you can come up with to say, I've got a question, give me some related data will work. But vector data stores are quite often used. LangChain.js has APIs for a number of different vector data stores, but I didn't want to have another process. So I'm using the in-memory data store, which means every time I read in the documents, I stick them into the in-memory vector data store. Slows my startup a little bit, but for experimentation, not a problem. The other thing that I'm showing here is the way that you find the relevant chunks to your, to what's in your database, to your question, sorry, is these things called embeddings. And the embeddings basically will take some text and generate a vector, and you can use that vector to basically match to see, like, is this data, are these words relevant to my question, the words in my question? And I haven't, I'm not the expert, so I don't know exactly how it works. But what I do know is if you provide, and I used in this case the Hugging Face transform embeddings because they seem to work pretty well, that basically says for each of those docs, generate an embedding. And that embedding is like a vector. And basically, so I can give it my question and it will give me relevant documents. So again, not too much code because there's a bunch of nice APIs in LangChain.js that let me say, okay, well, I'm going to create a vector memory in-memory vector store. I'm going to give it all my split documents. I'm going to give it the embeddings, which will generate those vectors to matching. Now I end up having a retriever, and that retriever can be used to say, give it a question, give me the relevant documents. And so you can see at the last line, I could just ask the retriever. It says, like, get me the relevant documents for, could I use NPM to start a Node.js application? And it will give me what it believes are the most relevant chunks. So if I've got 1,000 different chunks, it'll give me the top 3 in terms of like a match based on those vectors. So now I want to actually make a question. And so I'm going to create a slightly more complicated chain, again, the LangChain. So in this case, I have a prompt, and my prompt says, and I'm creating it from a template, answer the following question based on the context I'm providing you. If you don't know the answer, say so. In that particular format, I can add context. So I've got the angle brackets context. It will pass in through the chain. We'll end up getting the context in there, close context, and then I can also tell it, where to put the question. And then I create 2 parts in my chain. The first part in the chain is basically just like, hey, okay, I want to create a chain that says, use this model, use this prompt, and basically from that document chain, I can ask questions. But I want to use the retriever that I created earlier that has all the information from the Node.js reference architecture. So I create another link in the chain which says, okay, well, you're gonna pass on the question to the document chain, but before you do that, let's use this retriever to pull out some context and pass that on. And so that retriever, that get related documents, will be used to pull out the related documents. That's what I get in that context variable. And so now in what I'm passing over the model is some subset of the documents as well as my question. So now I'm just going to ask my question again. It looks very similar to what I had before. I call my retrieval question chain, said, should I use NPM to start a Node.js application? And I get a better answer. So hooray, it's actually used the documents that I provided, the subsets, when I made the question. So basically now it tells me generally not necessary to use NPM. And if I avoid using a container, I won't be exposed to security vulnerabilities that might be in Node.js. And it gives me some extra stuff. And if you've read the Node.js architecture, you can see that this is actually guidance that comes from there. And so it's great that, I've used retrieval augmented generation to retrieve some related documents. I passed those documents along with the question of the model, and I end up getting a better answer. So now that we've, on my journey, I was like, okay, I want to do a local model. Great. I know how to do that. It was much easier than I thought to load the model, ask some questions. I've heard all this stuff about retrieval augmented generation. So, how can I implement that? Well, it turns out that these additional libraries that are evolving, like LangChain, LaMedex, make that actually quite easy, as you've seen, to ingest my documents, add them to the context, and make my requests. So now I'm like, that's good, but okay, I now understand I'm running locally. But what about if I want to use different backends, right? And how do I switch? In other circumstances, libraries often give me the advantage of like, I can write my application, then I can switch those kinds of things pretty easily. That turns out to be the case as well in these emerging libraries, is that it's really easy to switch between different backends for serving your model. So I modified my application so that like, you can see this first section here is like, and I replaced like creating the model with a call to this get model. And so there it basically says like, if the type is Llama CPP, I'm going to do pretty much what you saw before. I'm going to find the model, get a path, and then I'm going to create a new Llama CPP instance. I added a few extra parameters here, as you can see, the one for the GPUs. Temperature is an interesting one that controls how creative the model is, so forth. But that looks pretty much like what I had before. But I can easily add an else, which says, oh, okay, well, no, wait a sec. If you told me if you want to use OpenAI, so the cloud hosted service with GPT-4 or whatever, basically, okay, for that, I'm going to need a key with the token. I can create an instance of a chat OpenAI model, again, provide similar things like temperature, or in this case, my API key. But all of the rest of my code is going to stay exactly the same, which is really nice. Similarly, I can even do that with a locally hosted model within my organization. So for example, OpenShift AI, one of Red Hat's products, will help you host your models. And it running a particular backend will let you connect using the Chat OpenAI interface. So I can create an instance of the Chat OpenAI APIs that will connect to that model, which happens to be running in OpenShift cluster. I can connect to it and I can make queries. So again, very easy to shift between running the model locally, running the model in a hosted cloud service, or running the model in on a servers within your organization. And I think that's one of the real advantages, that it's great to be able to develop in a tight loop, say locally, but then deploy to any one of these different environments. If you want to dive deeper, I actually put all of this, what I learned, into a learning path so that you can easily follow along. You can go to Red Hat developers and search on how to get started with large language models in Node.js. And I take you through all the steps, going through the different things that I kind of showed you today. Before I close out, just a few key takeaways. So really for me, one of the things I learned, it's really easy to run a local model. That's great because I can experiment without having to worry about my data being sent out. Because like if you go to ChatGPT, all the questions and all the context data, so if I'm using retrieval augmented generation, adding context data, all that's being sent out of my organization. And a lot of organizations are not going to want that to happen. So it's nice to be able to run an experiment with the local model. I think the strengths of Node.js still apply in this space. It's the fact that it's got that nice C++ integration through add-ons means that I could quite easily get going. The libraries that were developed to support JavaScript, as you saw, very simple APIs. And so really the strengths of like that have helped Node grow and be successful continue to apply. And, we're just integrating a different kind of backend service. And so that's really great. And that, and the last thing is that these libraries to improve DX, I think they're going to continue to evolve at a rapid pace, but like, it's great that TypeScript and JavaScript are typically the second language supported, and that they make our lives, easy to get started when we're using JavaScript. And that's really what I want to take you through today. And I think I'm probably at time, so we probably have just a few minutes for questions.
Thank you so much, Michael, for this presentation. It was great. We have some questions. Before we dive deep into the questions, I want to remind that you can still drop your questions. So until we'll have some of them, I will keep Michael here. And of course, we have the classic one, which is. Will I get the presentation file? Maybe I can remove this. Will I get the presentation file? So I think I did a good job, because while you were talking, I found the GitHub link. But if you have any way to share the presentation,
I'll definitely share the slide deck that has the links. I will share that in GitHub, and I can send it to you as well if you can pass it on.
Okay, yes. If you send it so people will keep staying here, we'll just share it here, or of course check the GitHub repository. We had some questions about if about the Linux let's say compatibility with this. Do you know by
I
chance?
haven't experimented with the non NVIDIA. I know, like, having talked to a few people, I went with NVIDIA and I stuck with Windows because that is the easy path. I do know one of my other colleagues has some GPU support enabled in a Linux operating system and AMD, but I don't have a good answer for you. I'd have to go look myself, but Windows and just in general, unfortunately, Windows and NVIDIA seem to be the easiest path of all. And then probably NVIDIA with Linux. I should probably test that out. That's one of the things I would like to do. Unfortunately, I only have one GPU, so I don't want to like re-image my machine multiple times. But
thank you for your answer. I have one question while, so you have some time if you want to drop one, which is like I want to prepare, for example, a presentation that like not exactly like yours, but like to talk about some models. So what do you think would be like a quick examples that I can show? I think you already showed something, but what do you think? Or maybe you have some new ideas because this presentation moves too fast.
I think that people asking a question and then asking a question to get a better answer. That's a nice demo, which lots of people are doing today. There's other extensions. So the next thing I'm going to look at is they have these things called I'm going to get the name wrong, but basically it lets you add capabilities to the models. So for example, like, hey, I want to send an email. So you could then ask it to say, tell me, what you know about X, and then send it to me in an email, right? Or, you could say, connect into something else. So that's another interesting thing, which is sort of like extending the capability of the model. And that seems to be like, I know Node Llama CPP, they have a beta version 3, which supports, I'm thinking it's called functions or something like that. But basically being able to do those other things, I think that's quite interesting. I've seen some other demos where like you have a multi-stage case where like you ask the model to do something for you, and then you use the output of that to do a second step almost. It's sort of like, like tell me all the movies that were published in 2012. Okay, from that list of movies, which ones had this particular person in it or something like, or even like the first one going against a database that says like, okay, find the things that find this data, and then basically use that data as part of the input to the next question.
Nice. Thank you so much, Michael. This, I think, it's also great. So, like incremental, improvements. This is also similar. It's basically we are adapting to how our AI model works. So it's sort of like it becomes like of a storytelling, like telling basically the improvement. So nice one. Thank you so much, Michael. So if you can share the link, I'll share it now during the presentation. Otherwise, you can check the GitHub repository. If you can stay until the end, I'll invite you back. But anyway, thanks a lot, Michael, and see you later.
Yeah, okay? I'll put it into GitHub now as the other presenters go ahead, and then I can share it in the chat when I'll pass it in the chat to you so you can share it in a few minutes.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you so much. Bye. Okay. Hi, Marco. How are you? How's it going? Finally.
Hello. Good. Yeah.
Nice. So usually I try to connect with all the Italian developers in the world, but I missed you for some reasons. But we fixed this bug. So Marco works in the Node.js core team. Also, you work at Nearform.
Yes.
Right. Yes. So please, Marco, introduce yourself, and then we'll get into your presentation. I'm super excited also to see like you in action, let's say, for the first time. almost live.
Yeah, so my name is Marco Ippolito. I'm a senior developer experience engineer at Nearform. I work on Node.js on some key areas. And today I'm going to talk a bit about some of the security vulnerabilities that were fixed in the past, and also would like to showcase some of the features that of Node.js that not everybody knows about, and some gossip. So
Yes, I was looking forward because I'm sure that you will share some vulnerabilities that I don't know. When you want, you can start sharing your screen. And again, if you have any questions about this, just drop them in the chat, and at the end we'll have another QA session. So yes, so I'm looking forward for this. Let's see how many of them you already know.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I
Nice.
will
Okay.
start
So that's it.
presenting.
Perfect. So best of
All
luck,
right.
Marco, and see you later. I see that there is this new logo of your form. This is sort of new. This one with the underscore. It's new,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Nice. Notice that.
Very new. Yeah.
Bye. Bye. Best of luck.
Thank
Bye.
you. So welcome everyone. Today we will talk about the top 10 vulnerabilities in Node.js. So my name is Marco Ippolito. I already presented myself, so we'll just skip on this one. So before we start with actually top 10 list, what I want to say is that what we're going to see today is a bunch of weaknesses that I will explain, and then we will see an example of vulnerability that we have fixed. And in the meanwhile, I will showcase a bit of the features that are related to the vulnerability and talk a bit about the project. So let's start with number 10. We have insufficient verification of data authenticity. So this one, it only happened once in the history of the project, and it's related to an experimental feature that not many people know about. So this vulnerability actually enables attackers to manipulate or inject data in the system, leading to other potential security compromises and breaches. So the example of this one is this CVE that has been issued in 2023. Integrity check according to policies can be circumvented. So not many people know that in Node.js we shipped a feature called policy that allowed you to check if a file has been tampered by checking the integrity of it. And with this vulnerability, an attacker would have been able to forge a checksum, and so Node.js would consider a file that has been tampered as valid. This is very interesting, and I put it in the lowest place because, as I said, it happened once. And to be honest, I don't think it's going to ever happen again because, well, this feature is experimental, and we, as a Node.js project, we decided to remove it. Right now is deprecated. And in a future PR that has not been released yet, will be completely removed. This is because this feature was not very clear to our users, and there were a lot of edge cases. So we decided to remove it. So this is number 10. Actually, my friend Rafael removed it a couple of weeks ago. We started a conversation about it. The PR is still open, but will probably be merged, and so you will never see this feature again. And yeah, that was number 10. As we get to the top of the list, we will see more spicy vulnerabilities. Let's go to number 9. We have path traversal. So this is quite common. I've seen this, I think, like 5 or 6 times in the history of the reports, and it's all of them are associated to a specific Node.js feature. We will see later. So path traversal is basically when an attacker is able to access files or directories that are not intended to be accessible. So he's able to gain access to data that he was not supposed to. This happens usually when the user is providing a path, and it's very hard to sanitize a path. So it always leads to path traversal, but in this case, it's related to a feature of Node.js that is the permission model. This is also experimental feature. We will see in the next slide how it works. But with this vulnerability that it has been fixed recently, so in 21.6.2, as a note, I've been started to work recently on Node.js security releases. So probably one of those I released myself, and I got very curious to see what was the history in terms of vulnerabilities, and that's why I created this top 10. So in this case, this was a path traversal by monkey patching buffer internal. So by monkey patching the buffer object, it was possible to bypass the permission model and read files on the file system that you were not supposed to access. As I said, this feature is experimental. We will see in a while what the permission model is if you don't know about it. So the permission model is actually a mechanism to restrict access to some of the resources. For example, you might restrict access to the file system, to the to worker threads, to child processes. So this is kind of useful to mitigate possible unwanted access to resources that you don't want to allow the Node.js process to. And once the permission model is set, it cannot be changed by the process itself. So by monkey patching, it was possible to bypass this restriction. And now, since a couple of versions ago, it's not possible anymore. And I want to highlight the importance of updating your Node.js version, because as you will see, these vulnerabilities get much more common, and it's important to be up to date with the release. We have number 8, modification of assumed immutable data. This occurs when data that you assume to be immutable, it is actually changed by an attacker. This is very common in JavaScript with prototype pollution, and we will see an example of prototype pollution in the next slide. This is very common because JavaScript has a prototype-based inheritance, so it's quite tricky to sanitize input to make sure that prototype pollution doesn't happen. In Node.js, we have something that's called primordials, and it's a controversial topic. So basically, we use some special functions instead. For example, you would use one of the string prototype functions. We would use a global function that would do the same thing, but it's something very, very related to the Node.js project. All of this to avoid prototype pollution. So in this vulnerability, we will see that this is quite old, from 2022. Not really too old, but not one of the latest. It was possible to do prototype pollution with a console table. So basically, it was possible to pass an object that contained the property proto, and that would override the prototype of console table. This was rated low because it didn't have a very big impact. But since the first two vulnerabilities we have seen are on an experimental feature, so I decided to put this one above them, because this obviously is much used rather than experimental features. So let's go to number 7. We have CRLF injection. CRLF stands for carriage return and line feed. This is when an attacker exploits the handling of new line characters, usually /n, and is able to inject some malicious data into the HTTP headers. This is very common in HTTP clients. In fact, if you didn't know, Node.js has shipped the Fetch API for web compatibility. I think it has been stable since Node 18, but I could be wrong. And at the beginning, we had this vulnerability that allowed it was possible to inject some malicious header inside the host header. We'll see an example here. As you can see, the host header, it has been exploited this /r/n to inject another header, which is AAA. The fetch API in Node.js is actually provided by a library called Undici. I will show it here. It's an HTTP client written from scratch exactly for Node.js, but you can also use it as an NPM package. And so a lot of vulnerabilities are related to Undici. And we will see later how a lot of the vulnerabilities that we will talk about today are related to HTTP, which is basically, in my opinion, the core of Node.js. So if you are curious about Undici, here's the GitHub. You can install it, you can play with it. It's very fast compared to other HTTP client. And when you do a fetch, you're actually using Undici. So number 6, we have a cryptographic issue. I wanted to be quite generic with this one. Like there are a million of different cryptographic issues. The one that I want to present today is a cryptographically weak pseudo random number generator. It can become quite hard to talk about cryptography in general because it's a science that's very advanced. So I will try to keep it as easy as possible. But usually it happens because of algorithm flows in the implementation of the algorithms. I've seen a few vulnerabilities that were related to a wrong implementation of the algorithm, or for example, we use OpenSSL in Node.js as a library for cryptography, and a lot of the vulnerabilities were related to OpenSSL. But in this case, we will see this vulnerability that's also from 2022 has been fixed in Node 18. This is related to web crypto. So if you don't know, Node.js ships the web crypto APIs for compatibility. It's basically allows you to use some of the crypto APIs, but without requiring the Node crypto package. And this is for compatibility with the browser. So you can use them. You can use global.dis.crypto, or you can just require the Node crypto package to access this module. So in this vulnerability, so the problem was that the entropy source to generate random pseudo-random data was it was not proper. Imagine on a machine that has just been booted, there isn't much entropy to generate this data, so it was easy to basically to brute force and find out what was the seed used to generate some of the random numbers, and therefore this vulnerability was rated as high. So as I said, this has been fixed in Node 18. So if you're using an LTS version, this is already been fixed. Okay, so we're halfway of the chart. We have a number 5. We have privilege escalation. We start to get serious. So privilege escalation happens when an attacker is able to obtain basically take over control to the machine, or is able to escalate their privileges, become a super user, and overall compromising the security of the whole overall system. This is also happened quite a few times in the Node.js history. We have in this case a very recent one. So I remember releasing this one in Node 21.6.2. So in this case, this vulnerability was caused by libuv, because of IO uring not dropping the privileges when you set UID. So basically, when you you change the UID of the process, it's not dropping the privileges correctly due to how the interaction between libuv and IO uring, which is a new feature of the Linux kernel. So to fix this, we actually disabled IO uring support on some of the versions of Node.js because there was not an easy fix. And if you don't know what libuv is, just a few words on libuv is basically it's the core. One of the Node.js is made by two main parts, which is one V8 and the other one is libuv. libuv takes care of the networking, file systems, asynchronous I/O, like all the interactions with the operating system is done by libuv, and it's also crucial to abstract some of the differences between different platforms. For example, libuv allows Node.js to work on macOS, on Windows, on PowerPC, on a lot of the hundreds of platforms that, not hundreds, but a lot of platforms that Node.js supports. And I was shocked to know that Node.js also runs on SmartOS, it runs on Android. So Node.js runs everywhere thanks to libuv. And this vulnerability was related to that. So as you can see, a lot of times vulnerabilities come from the dependencies of Node.js, like Undici, libuv, OpenSSL. We have a bunch of them. That's why also updating dependencies for the Node project itself is very important. Okay, we go to number 4 now. We have HTTP request smuggling. This is the most common one. I've seen this dozens of times in the Node.js reports. This is very, very common. So HTTP request smuggling is when you manipulate the HTTP request in a way that you can sneak some other HTTP request. It's like putting a request inside a request, and you can do some crazy stuff, and it exploits the way that HTTP is parsed. And Node.js, this has been very common due to the Node.js HTTP parser, which is LLHTTP, being lenient. So right now, the LLHTTP parser supports the 3 versions of HTTP, 0.9, 1, and 1.1, while and this leads to a lot of leniency. So the parser has to try to make sense out of old HTTP versions that are deprecated, and this is the reason why it is so common, because attackers always find a way to manipulate HTTP string and find the edge case where the HTTP parser gets confused and doesn't parse something correctly. This is also quite recent, fixed it, and I think I released this one in 21.7.2. It's HTTP request smuggling via content length obfuscation. So this made me laugh a lot, because basically, because of a single white space, an attacker could sneak a malicious payload inside an HTTP request. I will give an example. So as you can see, before content length, there is a single space, and that confuses the HTTP parser So an attacker is able to inject a get inside a post, and the HTTP parser will actually parse it will think that the get by / by is the correct one. It will ignore the first part. This is quite tricky, and that's why there is ongoing work by my colleague Paolo Insogna, who also fixed this vulnerability, to upgrade the Node.js HTTP parser. So to fix this vulnerability, we updated the LLHTTP, but we are also working on Milo, which is a new HTTP parser written in Rust. It's still highly experimental, and it has not been used yet in the Node.js project. And we are also it aims to replace LLHTTP, and it aims to remove all the leniency flags and supports the latest RFC and has the strict HTTP parsing. So this is cool gossip, something that has been going on for a while, and I hope we can ship it soon. All right, let's go to number 3. We have uncontrolled resource consumption. This vulnerability can be exploited by an attacker, and it aims to exhaust the system resources like GPU, memory, disk, space, network, and it can lead to denial of service or usually to degradation system performance. This vulnerability it basically allowed an attacker to inject a payload that was a huge payload inside an HTTP request, and the Node.js server would keep this payload in memory. Therefore, it would increase the memory usage and the network bandwidth. This has been, as I said, has been fixed in 21.6.2, also in v20. So you will, if you are using the latest LTS, this will be fixed. Those are quite tricky because let's see if I I could not provide the example for this one because the report has been only partially disclosed, so I'm only showing the public part. But so basically, this attack uses the chunk extension, which is an header, and Node.js was not checking the size of this header value, and it was unbound, so you could put like 6 GB of stuff inside this header, and Node.js would accept it. So also this one was fixed by my colleague Paolo, and very, very sneaky. And we are number 2. This is also very common. Where I've seen this in a bunch of reports inside Node.js, and it can lead to denial of service, so your servers get shut down. So this is quite severe. And number 2, we have denial of service itself. So while resource extortion, sorry, I cannot pronounce it, aims to degrade the capabilities of the server, denial of service, its aim is to shut down the server itself, rendering it inaccessible. And this is done by overwhelming the target with traffic, with network requests, or in any way possible. This is one of the few critical vulnerabilities that the Node.js project has seen in the past. So basically, this is called slow loris attack, and it works by sending a lot of connection to a server and keep those connections alive for as much time as possible. And so if you imagine a server opening so many connections, as many connections that it can, and those connections are alive, and they send just very small amount of bytes and very slowly. So the server doesn't time out, and it doesn't close those connections. And at some point, the server will finish the resources and will shut down. So this is called a slow loris attack. My colleague Paolo has done a talk specifically on this one. It's very interesting. And has been fixed in Node 14. So I think this was 2020, 4 years ago. But it's still very relevant, and I think it's still very cool. Okay, we arrived almost at the top. So, well, what do you think will be the #1 vulnerability? So actually, you will know in the next security release. So the most dangerous vulnerability is the one that you haven't discovered yet. So I just wanted to thank all the people that work on Node.js that allows us to use Node.js safely, and all those that fixed this vulnerability and work very hard to triage with the security reporters. So yeah, that was it for my talk. So I'm open to questions.
Plot twist at the end, Marco. Loved that. Everybody was waiting for the #1. I have a couple of questions, but I let also other people to drop them below. Thank you so much for your presentation, of course. And I can start with my question. So I saw that Shogun Milo, which is an HTTP parser written in Rust. So
yes.
Yeah, can you elaborate more, because I'm curious everything that involves Rust lately. So
yeah. So my colleague Paolo decided to. Paolo is the only maintainer of, like, one of the very few maintainers of LLHTTP, which is the current HTTP parser of Node.js. LLHTTP is an incredible piece of engineering, but it has some issues with maintainability. So he decided to rewrite the whole HTTP parser in Rust, because why not? And yeah, he's been doing a great job, and he's still experimental, and probably we're trying to ship Milo with 11, which is the Node.js HTTP client that also uses right now LLHTTP, and we plan to release it as a WebAssembly package, and maybe in the future roll it to Node.js itself.
This is very super interesting from my point of view. Also, of course, I know about 11, but for example, I never created like a video about that. So this is great, like to have your presentation here. And yes, maybe I have one more question, which is, what do you think is the vulnerability that it's easier to fix, but also you see this kind of, let's say, commonly around?
So the most, like, to be honest, the most common one are the ones that involve the LLHTTP. So the HTTP server on Node.js, I've seen like a lot. If you go through the hacker one, you will see that there are a lot. Not all of them are specifically easy, but most of the time, they are very common, because like the HTTP parser supports 3 versions of the HTTP. So the 0.9, I think it has been deprecated since like 25 years. So it's something very old that should not be used. But since we support it, then we need to add a lot of leniency flag to try to make sense out of the broken HTTP we receive. And this causes a lot of edge cases. So I would say that, yeah. HTTP smuggling, yes. There are a lot of them.
Okay, yes, thank you. Because on one side, you would like to have like full retrocompatibility, but you know that at some point this becomes almost an issue, I would say. So,
yes, it's an issue right now. It has become an issue.
Yes, okay, nice. Thank you so much, Marco. If that's okay for you, I would like to invite Michael back and having maybe a 5-10 minutes conversation also about the new version of Node.js. What do you think? Let's invite him back. Michael, welcome back.
Hello.
and yes, we can use that extra time, because I would like to, of course, to talk with Marco and of course with you about maybe some new features of Node.js 22. I just checked the announcement. I think it was some days ago. Can't remember. So yeah, we can have a conversation also in the chat. We can you can type even if you knew this or not. I would like to start with Marco, of course, and then we can have a conversation also with you, Mike. So Marco.
Yeah, I actually have written the release announcement. So
that's where I saw you, because I was preparing the Monthly Dev event, and then I checked the announcement and I recognized that it was you. Yes, now I know. Now I remember.
Yeah, so let me grab it. Maybe I can share the screen and we can.
Yes, of course. Or we can also.
Yeah, it's a lot of work to do the major releases, and it
was a big release. Yes,
Marco helped out with that with the most recent one. So that's.
I found.
All right.
I think. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sharing the screen. So there are a lot of very interesting features. Oh wait, this is the. Let me grab the announcement. Okay, so the first notable one is the update of V8 to 12.4. This is huge in my opinion, because it adds a lot of new JavaScript features to Node, like array from a sink, or the set method like set union, difference, blah blah blah, and iterators helpers. So iterators are becoming a key feature of JavaScript. So it's very cool to see that. And
nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So I'm also checking the link. Let's see if we find something interesting to discuss. We have the Maghreb. Yes. WebSocket maybe.
So we have a new WebSocket client. It's basically it has been part of Node already, because it was under a flag experimental WebSocket, but now has been removed under the flag, and it's implemented by Undici. So it's inside Undici and it's just exposed to Node.js.
I think the thing to add here too is that because of the Node projects, like our approach for new features, it takes a little bit of a thunder out of like the major, like what's announced and actually is new in 22. It's like we continually add new features, they flow into existing releases. So like, in this case, I think there was like one new thing in ESM, but like throughout the lifetime of 21, there was actually about 3 or 4 different things that we added in terms of progressing ESM. So I kind of see these major announcements as a good time to talk about everything that went in the last, 6 months, a year, because if we just look at what's on the release announcements, like that's like maybe 20% of what we actually get as in those, like in the majors. Otherwise, they're all just showing up in the minors of the existing, currents or LTS lines. So that's why, like, sometimes you look at these and it's like, well, there isn't that much. Well, no, there's a lot more stuff going in. Like I said, for example, on ESM, there's a bunch of key things like the import metas went in, but again, not went into 21 already. There's experimental direct detect module flag, and import assertions. There were some changes around that. So like lots of, basically to say lots of stuff going on that front. As well as I think like progress on the general trend to reduce having to do additional requires. So like, again, over the lifespan of 21, we've seen things like a style text came in, environment.env type things that came in as well. So like continued progress on like adding things so that you need less and less dependencies. Just trying to think of some of the other major things I think certainly some of the work that Marco did is worth calling out. Like over the last couple of majors, we've improved how dependencies are updated. So if you do look in the details of this release, there's lots of dependency updates, and that's because Marco helped put in place scripts which basically automatically update our dependencies, and so we're well more on top of those, and they get updated very quickly, and we see so releases have lots of those more very current dependencies in them as well. I don't know if there's any other things, Marco, that come to your mind in terms of like, not necessarily just in this release, but like, hey, things we've made good progress on.
Yeah, I mean, we are overall improving the developer experience of Node.js by a lot. Like you need a lot less packages. Like you don't need .env, you don't need Nodemon, you don't need Chalk. Like all these very common packages that like the test runner. Like right now, you can just run Node.js itself without external dependencies, and you have not all of them, but a lot of the tools that you would need. I think this improves a lot the quality of life of developers. And as I mentioned we have watch mode by default. So in this release, like you don't need Nodemon Nodemon anymore. We improved performance. We also this one is quite huge, support requiring ESM modules. So right now you can use require on ESM modules. It's still under a flag, so it will not it will not be enabled by default until next major probably. But this is huge because package authors can just write ESM packages, and they can be consumed by everyone. There are some exceptions, but generally this is amazing in my opinion.
Yes, thank you, Marco. I have one question about the watch mode. I don't know if you can scroll to that part.
Sure.
I don't know if you can answer. Thank you. You already answered about the Nodemon because I already know. I know that you probably will answer this another times already. I don't know if you are aware about the Docker Compose watch feature. Do you know that feature from Docker that helps you? Like it's similar to this, but let's say that's more like at container level. So this is like native inside the Node application. So do you know the differences, or maybe I don't know? You can talk or say
not
really.
More maybe Michael knows more about Docker.
Yeah, I don't really end up using Docker Compose. I'm either running like on Kubernetes or with Podman. So fortunately, I can't talk to that one too much either. I can imagine it being interesting though in terms of wanting to restart your containers. Mm-hmm. Although often I see some tools help even more where they try and update the content in a running container. So instead of restarting the container, you start your container and you map in a directory and your application's in that directory. So that like in that case, the watch mode would actually continue to help you because it could basically reload even though you're in a container when you update your application.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'll try it out because of course there are two different things. Docker Compose Watch is for the whole possible like technologies and so on. So this is specific to Node. And yes, I have one more if we don't have anyone because I'm curious. I know that we always always been. I think even Matteo said this, that like the watch feature. In the past, I think it had some issues with Windows. I don't know if I can remember it right or not. Maybe not.
I don't remember specifically with Windows, but I think Watch has had issues with all the current platforms. I remember having some issues on Linux, having some issues on macOS. So it's because it's the way that the Watch works. It's very platform specific. So on each operating system, it varies a bit. So it took quite some time to get stable, but right now it's considered stable, so it's safe to use for everyone.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Since it was marked stable in this release, I've got to think we've worked through most of those issues. So
nice. Thanks. It was really I can feel like there have been like so much work behind this. So thank you so much, Marco. Thank you so much, Michael. I think we are at the end of this event. We also almost covered the 1 hour and a half. So thank you so much, both of you. They were like great presentations. I really loved them, both of them. If you are in the chat, you can start to, if you have any last minute questions. I think that we shared the link to the Michael's presentation that is in the GitHub repository of Michael. And I don't know, Marco, if you have anything else that you want to share. Any of you would like to share something? Also, like if you are currently, I don't know, working on something specific, we have some few minutes. If you have anything else that you want to discuss here. Marco just shared a link. Is this the presentation?
Yes.
Can we? Okay, let's just test it. If it's working for me. It's working. Thank you so much for sharing. Of course, this. I know that some people will always look into them. Also love the Lego thing at the end. We have the links to both of the speakers in the description, so be sure to follow them, check them out. And yes, so thank you so much for these presentations. Really loved them. I don't know if you have some more conferences or more talks coming up. I've been quiet for some months, but soon I will be back to them. And thank you so much for putting all this effort in preparing these presentations. We really appreciate that. As I said, we are celebrating today the 40th event of the monthly dev. So we have been going for a while, and we didn't skip a single month.
Wow.
So
it has been for real. One.
I mean, it has been for real, the monthly dev. We have been monthly since it's 3 years and 4 months. So thank you so much, especially for the speakers to create this free event for everyone. So the last shout out, of course, is for daily.dev. You can just check it out, try. We have a browser, we have browser extensions, we have mobile app, we have different ways to access it. It's a great way to stay up to date as a developer. And yes, so yes, thank you so much, Iris. And yes, so thank you. And we are about to close. Any final thoughts? Something that you want to share?
The only thing I'll throw in, if people are interested, the other thing I've been, spending some time obviously looking at large language models. The other thing I've been looking at is running Node.js at the edge. So I do have a series that I've been working on. I'll paste the link in the chat in case anybody's interested in looking at that, playing around with the Raspberry Pi and running Node.js on that and in containers and with Kubernetes and having fun trying to get access to the devices sometimes. So
yes, I hate you, Michael, because I have a Raspberry Pi. At some point, I will. You are pushing me to do this because I have that. I have the Arduino thing. So at some point, I'll just stop whatever I'm doing with my life and I'll go this again. I'm trying to stop me because I know that this is like it's like a rabbit hole. Yeah. But okay, it's okay. Yes. So thank you. I also share that. Yes, Marco.
Yeah, just one thing to all the listeners. If you're interested in the Node.js projects and you want to start contributing, getting involved, you can just reach us on the Slack channel, the OpenJS Foundation Slack channel. I will post it in the chat later. So you can come talk to us, get involved, join working groups. We have working groups for all the key areas of Node.js. They are open and free, so everybody can join. There are YouTube recordings, so it's very easy to get involved if you're interested. And Node.js is a very open governance project, and everybody's voice is important.
Nice.
So
yeah, it's definitely a really good point. Like I mentioned, Node add-on API. That's one where we have a good working group that meets every Friday, and Marco and I meet regularly in the security working group 1 and next 10. So if you want to meet people and sort of find some people with shared interests, it's a really good way to do it.
Yes, I'm genuinely interested. I'm not saying this because we are on the monthly dev event. So Marco, maybe we can keep in touch because I don't know where I'll take the time, but I'm for sure my heart is interested into this. So let's see how much I can dedicate. But I think it's more like a mindset. We do whatever we can. So I of course always loved the project. Let me share these two links. The one is the OpenJS Foundation here. It's
There is the
getting
link
late
to the
for
Slack channel. Yeah.
yes, and then we have the GitHub link here. You see, it's getting late for me. Like it's we're going a bit overrun. Okay, perfect. So we highlighted these two. So thanks again. Great presentation. So super interesting. I'll see what I can do with the Slack channel of the OpenJS Foundation, Marco. Can't promise, but I'll try my best. And yes, so thank you so much, and we'll see you in about 1 month. We have one more episode. You can just check our YouTube channel. It will be about testing, if I'm not wrong. And yes, perfect. Thank you so much. We can just close it now. Thank you. Bye everyone,
Bye.
and see you
Bye.
next month. Bye.
Bye.
In the stream.